Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is an acquired neurodegenerative disease caused by repeated head injury and brain trauma. Historically known as dementia pugilistica or punch drunkenness, it has been observed in athletes, particularly those involved in combat sports, as well as military personnel, for decades, with serious research beginning in the 1920s. A slow onset condition, it develops years after the traumatic injuries are incurred, and is linked to the buildup of tau proteins in the brain, leading to dizziness, headaches, memory loss, and impulsive emotional outbursts, often resembling the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. There is no cure for CTE, and it cannot be definitively diagnosed in a living sufferer, requiring an autopsy to be formally identified. It can be prevented but not treated. Although not directly fatal, there have been a number of prominent suicides among individuals later diagnosed with the condition, as its physical and mental symptoms take their toll. NFL players, including Junior Seau and Aaron Hernandez, hockey players Wade Belak and Rick Ripien, BMX legend Dave Murrah, and Australian footballer Shane Tuck are among those to have died by suicide in connection with the condition. In the world of professional wrestling, it has been a concern for over 15 years, with initiatives led by retired performer Christopher Nowinski highlighting the dangers of head trauma. Among the wrestling personalities claimed by its onset are Timothy Well, Jimmy Snuka, Chris Benoit, and the original Scream Queen of the Squared Circle, Daphne. Shannon Spruill was born on a US military base in Wiesbaden, West Germany on July 17, 1975. Spruill's father was a member of the US Air Force, and her early life saw the family moving between locations in Germany, England and the United States before her father's retirement, having reached the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Spruill attended university in Atlanta, studying film and video production at Georgia State University and graduating in 1998. Her intention following this was to go into acting full-time. Her trajectory was changed when she responded to a casting call from Atlanta-based wrestling promotion World Championship Wrestling in 1999. Spruill, a wrestling fan from childhood, impressed casting agents with her familiarity with the promotion's storylines and was hired quickly. Spruill made her debut for WCW as Daphne Unger, the unstable on-screen girlfriend of David Flair, later that year. The character was based on several characters from recent pop culture, including the Batman villain Harley Quinn, who had recently been introduced as the Joker's maniacal love interest, and Mallory Knox, the deceptively violent character played by Juliette Lewis in the film Natural Born Killers. As Daphne, Spruill teamed up with Flair and his accomplice Crowbar to form a trio of over-the-top, howling mad lunatics, whose antics were frequently punctuated by her trademark piercing scream. Although initially cast as a valet accompanying Flair and Crowbar at ringside, Daphne also trained at WCW's wrestling school, the Power Plant, eventually entering into in-ring competition during her run, feuding not only with other women wrestlers like Miss Hancock, but competing in intergender matches, eventually having a brief reign as the WCW Cruiserweight Champion, in a curious program which saw her never defeat the champion to win the title, nor be defeated herself to lose it. Colleagues from the time described Daphne as enthusiastic and humble, excited and thankful to be part of the industry, and all around a well-liked personality behind the scenes. However, by the turn of the millennium, WCW was struggling. Internal strife led to repeated changes to the product, which saw viewership and paid attendance drop. With a corporate merger between parent company Turner Media and Time Warner on the horizon, Daphne was among the talent released for budgetary reasons in February 2001. Scant weeks later, the company and many of its talent contracts were purchased by its rival, the World Wrestling Federation, now the WWE, leaving the recently released Daphne to find her way on the nascent independent scene of the time. Following her release from WCW, Daphne continued her wrestling training under the legendary Dusty Rhodes, attending a training camp as part of his Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling promotion for several months, and wrestling on shows held by the company. She also worked for the newly founded Ring of Honor throughout 2003, teaming up as part of the Second City Saints group alongside Ace Steel, Colt Cabana and CM Punk, the latter of whom she briefly dated. After a few appearances for the fledgling Total Non-Stop Action and a short stint on a developmental contract for WWE, Daphne retired for the first time in 2003, gifting her wrestling boots to her then roommate Mickie James. This retirement did not last long, however, and in 2007 Daphne returned to the world of wrestling, first as a manager in the all-woman promotion Shimmer Women Athletes, before resuming in-ring wrestling the following year. Before long, she was back in touch with a writer from her days in WCW, Vince Russo, who by now was working for TNA, and created a role for her as a parody of then Governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin. The Governor character soon transitioned into Daphne reprising her original Daphne gimmick, although with the earlier kookiness replaced with a more sinister villainous edge. During this run, while also continuing to work for Shimmer, she competed once again in intergender matches, as well as more hardcore based performances involving steel cages, tables, first blood stipulations and thumbtacks. Years of wrestling, but perhaps the accelerated rate at which she was performing hardcore high spots in TNA began to take their toll on Daphne during the years from 2010 onwards. She suffered a concussion after a bump from the ring apron through a table during a mixed tag match, and later another serious concussion alongside a stinger, a neurological injury caused by damage to the brachial nerves during an untelevised dark match. By early 2011, Daphne's TNA contract expired and was not renewed. She filed suit against the company for workers' compensation as a result of her injuries, which was later settled out of court. Later in 2011, Spruill was involved in a car accident which she believed nearly proved fatal. By this point she had developed serious post-concussion symptoms, including a strong aversion to light, having to cover the windows of her home with blankets to alleviate the sensitivity. Daphne was coping with depression and had previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2003, conditions undoubtedly compounded by the ill health experienced due to her neurological injuries. She would later have several cervical vertebrae fused due to the pressure they were placing on her spinal column, calling the surgery a rite of passage among wrestlers. Daphne, who had long cultivated a reputation as a mentor figure in the industry, began urging younger talent to take greater care of their health in light of injury risks. "Your health is too important," she wrote. And she knew this firsthand, clearly struggling with what she believed to be CTE. In September 2021, she took to social media in a video that served as a suicide note, requesting that her brain be donated for research into the condition. Concerned friends, family and fans tried reaching out upon seeing the video stream, but it tragically proved too late. Spruill was found dead the following day. She was 46 years old. Immediately following her passing, the wrestling industry saw an outpouring of support and grief for Daphne. Colleagues and friends from her over 2 decades in the business were forthcoming with heartfelt reminiscences and kind words. Time and again, Daphne was remembered as kind, sweet, caring and fun. A recurring theme was her mentorship of women in the industry. Developing women's wrestling was a lifelong driver for her, and the list of prominent names who credit her for shaping their careers is endless. Mickie James, Allysin Kay, Courtney Rush, Velvet Sky, Marty Bell, Ivelisse, Mischief, Cheerleader Melissa, Awesome Kong, and many more besides. A memorial match was held in her honour by Impact Wrestling, the successor to TNA, 2 weeks after her death at the Knockouts Knockdown event. On a wider level, Daphne's death reignited discussion on the nature of head trauma and mental health within the wrestling industry. Hers was the third suicide of a woman in the industry in as many years, following the deaths of Ashley Massaro and Hana Kimura, and calls were made from inside and outside the industry for greater mental health counselling to be made available for wrestlers by their employers, similar to how WWE's drug-based wellness policy formed in response to prominent drug-related deaths. Several of the testimonials to Daphne's life also prominently highlighted suicide prevention hotlines for those struggling with suicidal thoughts. Several points of contact will be included in the description for this video as well. However, as the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And from Daphne's writings it was clear that she was struggling with the aftermath of CTE. Her last message to the public called for her brain to be donated for concussion research, and her death was the result of a gunshot wound to the chest, echoing that of American football players Junior Seau and Dave Jurison, both of whom were posthumously diagnosed with the condition. CTE is irreversible, it is incurable, but it is not unavoidable. Modern professional wrestling promotions take concussions more seriously than ever before, as do an increasing number of competitive sports. But it is hard to be ever too careful. If you find yourself suffering any kind of head injury, rest. Consult a doctor. As Daphne herself said, your health is too important.